Welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha, a podcast shared by David Roylance. This podcast is dedicated to guiding you to completely eliminate the discontent mind and the suffering it causes by attaining enlightenment. Learn and practice the teachings of Gotama Buddha that will guide you to fully attain a peaceful, calm, serene, and content mind with joy. To support this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha or visit buddhadailywisdom.com, where you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online learning resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Now, here's our teacher to share more.
Sawadee Kap, hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our Pali Canon and English study group, and we're studying the words of the Buddha. We're in Volume 8, Chapters 11 through 20. So I'd like to welcome all of you to our class today, whether you're joining for the first time or you're joining regularly. The way that we do this particular class is we have the words of the Buddha that are from the book series that I share titled The Words of the Buddha, The Path to Enlightenment, Revealing the Hidden. And what I do is I invite students who are in Zoom to be able to volunteer to read a particular chapter. And then after a student reads the chapter, I will share some teachings on that. Then I'm going to open up to any and all questions that you might ask. If you would like to either volunteer to read or you have a question and you're in Zoom, all you need to do is electronically raise your hand. And then when I see that through the electronic forum, then I'll be able to call on you to be able to read the chapter and or ask questions. If you're in Facebook or YouTube and you would like to ask questions, you can put that into the comment section. I'll be able to see that, and then I'll be able to answer your question for you. You're also welcome to come into Zoom if you'd like, because it's right there in the comment section of the video that you're welcome to come into Zoom and participate that way through volunteering to read or anything that you'd like to do through Zoom, because that's a nice way to interact in the class. So I'm going to go ahead and get started, and it looks like Marcy's volunteering to read this first one. So go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, Teacher David. The foremost, the best, the distinguished, the supreme, the finest householder. Householder, the one enjoying sensual pleasures.
Sounds like someone's chanting. Who's that guy?
I wonder who that is. My apologies, everyone. Okay. The one enjoying sensual pleasures, who seeks wealth righteously without violence and makes himself joyful and pleased and shares it and does meritorious deeds and uses the wealth without being tied to it, obsessed with it, and blindly absorbed in it, seeing the danger in it and understanding the escape. He may be praised on 4 grounds. The first ground on which he may be praised is that he seeks wealth righteously without violence. The second ground on which he may be praised is that he makes himself joyful and pleased. The third ground on which he may be praised is that he shares the wealth and does meritorious deeds. The fourth ground on which he may be praised is that he uses the wealth without being tied to it, obsessed with it, blindly absorbed in it, seeing the danger in it, and understanding the escape. This person who enjoys sensual pleasures may be praised on these 4 grounds. This householder is the foremost, the best, the distinguished, the supreme, the finest kind of person who enjoys sensual pleasures. Just as from a cow comes milk, from milk curd, from curd butter, from butter ghee, from ghee comes cream of ghee, which is reckoned the foremost of all of these. So too, this kind of person who enjoys sensual pleasures is the foremost, the best, the distinguished, the supreme, and the finest of all those who seek wealth righteously, without violence, having obtained it, makes himself joyful and pleased, shares the wealth, does meritorious deeds, and uses the wealth without being tied to it, obsessed with it, and blindly absorbed in it, seeing the danger in it and understanding the escape.
All right. Thank you, ma'am. So this particular book is all about teachings for household practitioners, all the other books are for household practitioners too, but this one is just kind of like really geared toward household practitioners. And not only would household practitioners need to learn these teachings, but ordained practitioners would be beneficial for them to learn these too, because they could actually practice them for themselves, or they can teach them to household practitioners. So here we've got a discourse from the Buddha talking specifically about household practitioners and kind of this finest household practitioner, meaning like, what would you do as a household practitioner in addition to all the other teachings that he shares in order to be able to help you become closer and closer to enlightenment? In this particular discourse, he's mainly talking about wealth. And of course, there's other things that you need as well in order to make your way to enlightenment in terms of teachings. But here, one of the things that household practitioners do is they tend to work and they tend to acquire money and they tend to have money to a certain degree. And the Buddha is teaching you how to ensure that you acquire that wealth in a certain way and that it's used in a certain way that's going to ensure that you're not attached to it, that you're not craving and longing and yearning to it. Because if you have that, your mind's going to be discontent. So if your bank account balance is up here and you're really happy, then when it goes down here, you'll be sad or frustrated. So you're, as a household practitioner, going to have money and wealth, and you can do that without being attached to it. Sometimes people think like getting to enlightenment means you need to be poor and lacking resources and, living in the forest, almost like a homeless person and, things like this. And this isn't actually true. I mean, obviously the Buddha did that and that is how he got to enlightenment, but that's one particular lifestyle. There's other lifestyles like a household practitioner that you can get to enlightenment too, but you need to learn how to acquire your wealth without harming others. That's what the Buddha is talking about here in this first one. He's saying on the first ground, which he may be praised, is to seek wealth righteously without violence. Now here, when he's talking about praise, it's not like we literally go around and praise people. What he's saying is it would be wise for you to seek wealth without actually harming other beings. And he teaches you how to do that in the Eightfold Path as part of right livelihood. He teaches you to ensure you're not selling weapons, living beings, meat, substances that cause heedlessness, and poisons, because those 5 are going to cause harm to other beings, and then that harm is going to come back to you. And then he teaches you to eliminate scheming, flattery, hinting, belittling, and pursuing gain with gain. And I teach those in all the foundational classes. So if you're practicing to that level or you're working on getting to that level, that's the first fold of purification. And that would be ensuring that you're practicing in a way where you're acquiring wealth without causing harm or violence to others. And this would be a righteous way, or a healthy way, or a beneficial way to be able to practice and acquire wealth. Then once you acquire that wealth, you would like to make sure that you use a certain amount of it to be comfortable yourself. You're going to need food, clothing, shelter, and medical care. And you're going to need to spend some of that money on yourself in order to make sure that you're in the middle, that you're not craving and longing and yearning like the Buddha was talking about in this discourse, but you're also not on the other side where you're so frugal and you don't even have the basic food and necessity that you need in order to take care of yourself. So you need to come to this middle where you create some comfort for yourself and also for the people around you. The Buddha talks about that in other discourses. He doesn't say that here, but in other discourses he talks about taking care of your life partner and your children and people like this, your parents. He talks about that. Like, of course, you've got to be in the middle with that. You can't just, overextend yourself with, giving money to everybody and anybody. But he basically says to use this wealth righteously in other discourses. Here he's using the term joyful and pleased, making sure that you're comfortable in the things that you're purchasing for yourself and that you're not being so frugal that you aren't even having the needs that you need to be met. Then the third thing, he's talking about meritorious deeds. What meritorious deeds are is where you're using a certain portion of your resources to be able to help other people get access to the teachings of the Buddha. Because if you've learned and you've studied deeply and you see the improvement to the condition of your mind, you might be at a point where you're interested in seeing other people also get access to those teachings, because his teachings actually work. It's kind of like one of those rare things nowadays where it's like, as advertised, they actually do work. And as you learn his original words and you practice that and you see how it's improving the condition of your mind and the condition of your life, you might decide through your generosity and your loving kindness and your compassion that you would like to be able to help other people to get access to these teachings. So the Buddha suggests for you to use a certain portion of your wealth in order to help the teachings reach other people. And this is going to help you to practice generosity so you're not craving and clinging and holding on to the money and wealth that you've acquired. And keep in mind that the Buddha is not teaching this because he was trying to enrich himself. He actually didn't even accept gold and silver as part of his practice. At the time, that was the currency. And he could live his life that way because he lived right alongside of his students, and they could give him food and shelter and medical care and clothing and stuff like that. Where today, teachers and ordained practitioners, they do accept a certain amount of financial support, but you should see them using that for themselves to provide for their own basic needs. But then you should see things coming back to the community and beneficial results coming back to the community, like classes and courses and retreats, the ability to help people to be able to get to enlightenment. But this is the third thing that the Buddha is saying that would be wise for you to do with your wealth, is to help other people to be able to get access to the teachings. And that's a decision for you to make. Then the fourth thing that he's talking about here is making sure that you're not tied to your money, that you're not obsessed with it, blindly absorbed in it, right? That would be like the craving, the desire, the attachment, checking your bank statement every single day, kind of like really worried about every little amount of money and holding on to it tightly. And then he talks about seeing the danger in it, seeing the danger in the craving, desire, attachment. That if your mind is absorbed and obsessed with this money, you need to see the danger in that, because the danger is that your mind's going to get to experience discontentedness. You're going to get angry and frustrated and irritated and annoyed and things like this. You're going to have stress and anxiety around this money, because as your money goes up, you'll be really happy and excited. And when it comes down, you'll be frustrated and agitated or annoyed. So you need to see the danger in the mind being obsessed and blindly absorbed in money and wealth. Then you need to understand the escape. Here, what he's talking about is the Eightfold Path. That's the escape from this craving, desire, attachment, where the mind's longing, yearning, and holding on to your money. So this is the fourth thing that he's suggesting that a household practitioner understand, is not to be obsessed and blindly absorbed with your money. Understand that there's danger if you allow your mind to do that, that there's going to be discontentedness. And then make sure you understand the escape, which is understanding the Eightfold Path in detail so that you can then practice that. Then the Buddha goes on to provide an analogy to help you understand that this is like the foremost, the best, most distinguished household practitioner. A household practitioner is enjoying sensual pleasures to a certain degree, more so than an ordained practitioner. So for a household practitioner to enjoy sensual pleasures, then he's saying, okay, out of this person who's choosing to live this household life and not enter into this homeless life of being ordained, that he gives this analogy of this product of milk coming from a cow that becomes more and more purified and better quality. And people would have understood this analogy back then, because a lot of them were farmers and they understood taking milk from a cow, turning it into milk curd, curd butter, butter ghee, and then cream of ghee. This is like taking a raw product and making it more and more of a higher quality. And he's saying the same thing for a household practitioner, that if you accomplish these four things about your wealth, the mind is becoming more and more wholesome. You're becoming a better and better individual. You're becoming more wholesome as a household practitioner. So he teaches us to make sure that we're acquiring wealth righteously, we're not causing harm to others, that we use that wealth to make ourselves comfortable and make sure that we're using that, not being so frugal, but also not overextending ourselves. Because if your expenses are higher than your income, you're going to be flipped around here and it's going to cause difficulties. You would like to flip that up where your income is higher than your expenses. And this will help you to ensure that you don't have stress and anxiety around money. So you need that comfort for your own wealth. then using it for meritorious deeds to help other people get access to the teachings, and then ensuring that you understand not to be obsessed and absorbed in your money, that you understand the danger, that there can be discontentedness because of that craving, desire, attachment, and then understanding that escape, which is the Eightfold Path. So let me know what questions you guys have here. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So I'm going to move on to the next chapter, 12. Is there someone? Oh, there's Pat. Okay, I'll go ahead and get you there, Pat. Pat's going to volunteer to read this one. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. More terrible and frightful than the great inferno. Monks, there exists a hell named the great inferno. There, whatever from one sees with the eye is undesirable, never desirable, unlovely, never lovely, disagreeable, never agreeable. Whatever sound one hears with the ear is undesirable, never desirable, unlovely, never lovely, disagreeable, never agreeable. Whatever odor one smells with the nose is undesirable, never desirable, unlovely, never lovely, disagreeable, never agreeable. Whatever flavor one tastes with the tongue is undesirable, never desirable, never lovely, whatever one body is undesirable, never desirable, unlovely, never lovely, disagreeable, never agreeable. When this was said, a certain monk said to the perfectly enlightened one, that inferno, venerable sir, is indeed terrible. That inferno is indeed very terrible. But is there, venerable sir, any other inferno more terrible and frightful than that one? There is, monk. But what, venerable sir, is that inferno more terrible and frightful than that one? Those ascetics or Brahmins, monk, who do not understand as it really is, this is discontentedness. This is the cause of discontentedness. This is the elimination of discontentedness. This is the way leading to the elimination of discontentedness. They delight in volitional formations that lead to birth, in volitional formations that lead to aging, in volitional formations that lead to death, in volitional formations that lead to sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair. Delighting in such volitional formations, they generate volitional formations that lead to birth, generate volitional formations that lead to aging, generate volitional formations that lead to death, generate volitional formations that lead to sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair. Having yet generated such volitional formations, they are burnt by the inferno of birth, burnt by the inferno of aging, burnt by the inferno of death, burnt by the inferno of sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair. They are not freed from birth, aging, and death, not freed from sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair, not free from discontentedness, I say. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Pat. So this is a very deep discourse. It's only about a page and a quarter, but there's a lot that the Buddha is talking about here. First, he's explaining this great inferno, this particular hell that he's describing. And the Buddha taught 5 realms, and these realms can actually be independently verified. He teach hell, the animal realm, afflicted spirits, the human realm, and the heavenly realm. And you may or may not have actually independently verified these yet, but you can, as you start journeying on the path to enlightenment, you can get to the point where you verify these particular realms, because remember, his teachings aren't based in any kind of belief or anything like that. And all of these realms, they are impermanent, that beings are moving in and out of them all the time. Sometimes people are taught something like hell is permanent, where we can see that that's not true because of the universal truth of impermanence. But nonetheless, he's describing this hell, and he's using the 6 sense bases to describe it. He's essentially talking about the eyes, ears, nose, the tongue, the body, and then the mind itself. And that when you experience contact through these in the unenlightened state, if you have craving, desire, attachment in your mind, you're going to see that contact is either agreeable or disagreeable. And if it's agreeable to you, you'll experience the pleasant feelings like happiness, excitement, elation, thrill, exhilaration, euphoria. And if you experience the disagreeable contact, you're going to experience painful feelings like the anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, and things like that. What the Buddha is saying here is that this great inferno, that all you're experiencing is painful feelings, because every situation that you're in, every contact that you're having, the mind is experiencing disagreeable contact. And now one's going to experience painful feelings. And of course, we can understand that, yes, being in the hell realm is very, very, very painful. And then his student says, well, is there a hell that is more terrible and more frightful than that one that you just described? Because that sounds miserable, right? Well, the Buddha just says, yeah, there is, right? He doesn't go any further. He just says, yeah, there is, monk, right? Because now it's up to the student to ask questions, right? It's not like, he's just going to lay out a whole bunch of things. He just says, yeah, there is. And then he says, okay, well, what is it then? What is the place that's more frightful than that? And the Buddha gives a really intelligent answer here. And this is something that he's teaching you, is that what's more painful and more frightful and more terrible than living in that particular realm of the hell realm is to live in the human realm without understanding the Four Noble Truths. That's what he's saying. He's saying this is discontentedness. This is the cause of discontentedness, the elimination of it, and the way leading to the elimination of discontentedness. This is him pointing to the Four Noble Truths. That's his very first teaching, where you can have a breakthrough to understanding what is causing the mind to be discontent. And this is what you learn as the very first teaching. But for those ascetics and Brahmins, anybody really, even someone who's not an ascetic or Brahmin, even a household practitioner who doesn't understand the Four Noble Truths, the Buddha is saying this is a hell even worse than actual hell. And the reason why is because without having that breakthrough to understand the cause of your discontent feelings, you're just going to stay stuck in this continuous cycle over and over and over again. Not only in this life, experiencing discontentedness over and over and over again, but the overall cycle of rebirth, where you just keep coming back into the world over and over and over again, experiencing the aging, sickness, death, sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair. So that's what he's saying. He's saying because people delight in choices and decisions that are continuing to keep them stuck in the cycle of rebirth, where if there's birth, there's going to be aging and death, sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair. So that's like a real hell to live, because there's no way for you to escape until you actually understand the Four Noble Truths. Once you understand the Four Noble Truths, then you understand that there is an escape for you. But without that understanding and that wisdom, it's like living in hell. And an individual would continue to make choices and decisions that's leading to this continuous birth, aging, and death, and also continuous sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair. Then he says, delighting in those decisions, meaning that indulging in decisions, right? There's certain cravings. Maybe there's killing or stealing or sexual misconduct. There's lying. Maybe there's substances that cause heedlessness. Maybe someone's doing all kinds of things around their intention, speech, and actions and their livelihood that are leading to harmful results. And this individual just keeps experiencing difficulties and struggles over and over and over and over again. So this is like the indulgence in those decisions, because an individual without an understanding of the Four Noble Truths is going to continue to make unwise decisions because they don't understand. And then having generated those particular decisions, they're going to continue to experience this over and over and over and over and over again. So he's saying this is like the worst hell, is not understanding the Four Noble Truths. And you might be able to relate to that if you currently understand the Four Noble Truths and you understand what the Buddha taught there and how important that teaching is. You might think back to the time before you knew the Four Noble Truths and how much of a hell you might have been living, that you weren't on the path, firmly on the path, learning and growing and developing to get to enlightenment. So let me know what questions you guys have. Looks like Yusuf and Samantha and some other people have questions. So go ahead, Yusuf.
Sir, the idea that we have about hell in our religions and earth religion is that when we go to hell, we are being tortured by fire, lava, melting iron, or something similar. Is it the same view in Buddhism?
Yes, the Buddha describes those kinds of things. If you look in volume 11 of the book series, he describes some of the things that are going on in the hell realm. And you can learn that, and you would learn that if you're in this program, because we'll eventually get to that.
Okay, so he said that the hell that is more great than that inferno hell is people that does not understand the Four Noble Truths. But I don't see how this is true. He always talks about escaping the cycle of rebirth, but it isn't that big suffering. Like it isn't bigger than the suffering of the inferno hell, because even though I have described for you in the past that I was in the first year of college like living in hell due to the cravings in the mind, but that still isn't greater than being tortured by fire and lava and similar things. How come life or the cycle of rebirth is more greater than the inferno hell?
Because there's no way for you to escape it, and you're going to continue to experience it over and over and over again.
Okay, so what? In this life right now, this life, even though that I am suffering, is still better than being suffered by fire and lava.
But by not knowing what the Four Noble Truths are, that means that you have the ability to be reborn back down into hell, into the animal realm, into afflicted spirits, and so forth and so on. So without knowing the Four Noble Truths, you're going to continue to experience it over and over and over and over and over again.
Okay, is the hell realm punishment for our mistakes?
No, it's the natural law of karma that because of the choices and decisions that an individual makes to not train their mind, there's a certain amount of craving, anger, and ignorance in the mind, and that's leading to the result of being reborn there. And now in that realm, you're going to need to extinguish a certain amount of your unwholesome karma to give you an opportunity to then be reborn into the other realms and get to the point where you ultimately have opportunities to be able to get to enlightenment either in the human realm or the heavenly realm.
So, okay, if it's not punishment, then is it a way for us to learn from our mistakes? Like, look, Yusuf, now you are in hell. So learn from those mistakes you made and reach enlightenment so that we don't go to hell again. Is it for us to learn from our mistakes? Or it is just like a natural cycle that as same as we live, we die, we live, we die. Like we live now, we go to the next realm now, we go to the next realm now. It's just like a continuous cycle.
It would be wise for those beings in the hell realm to learn from their mistakes, but they have very minimal opportunity for that because they're in such great pain that they don't really have much opportunity for that. They will ultimately extinguish their unwholesome karma and move on to other realms, but ultimately they're extinguishing their karma. So like, let's just say you were in the human realm, and let's just say you were like a serial murderer killing a lot of people, right? Well, if you don't make any changes in this particular life, then there's the potential for you to be reborn into the hell realm, and now you're going to experience all that pain. And now as you extinguish that, then you'll have the opportunity to move into other realms. There's not much opportunity to cultivate wisdom in the hell realm. It's just burning off the unwholesome karma. You're experiencing the results of all the pain that you caused to others. You're now experiencing that coming back to you because you can't run and hide from that pain that you caused to others. So now that pain is coming back to you, and all you're doing is essentially experiencing that in the hell realm.
Okay, let me put this question in this way. In my religion, if we did mistakes, we are going to hell. So I have always been wondering, why going to hell if we can't like repair those mistakes? Like now if I die and then go to hell and be in hell forever, as my religion says about some situations, then how will I ever have the opportunity to make those mistakes, to eliminate those mistakes and to be like a better person? Can you answer such a question?
I wouldn't confuse what you've learned in your current religion to what the Buddha is describing. These are two different things. You're not going to hell permanently to be punished or anything like that. Nobody's sending you to hell. It's your own decisions that are leading to that. And what's going to occur is that you're going to experience the unwholesome results of the decisions that you've made that led you there. And now that you're there, you're going to experience that harm coming back to you. And that's all that's really happening there. And then once you've experienced enough of that and you've extinguished your unwholesome karma on that to that level of degree, now there's going to be rebirth into another realm in order for you to now continue to move towards improvement if that's what you choose.
Do you see it as a silly idea that in a religion it contains that if you did mistakes, you are going to hell? Like, what's the point if I am going to hell and not going to get back to life to make those mistakes right? What is the point of going to hell anyway? To being tortured? Is it a silly idea? Do you think that?
I don't think of it as a silly idea. It's what's truly happening is that an individual is experiencing the results of their decisions. I can't speak about Muslim teachings and what they think. I wouldn't refer to it as a silly idea because I know with 100% certainty that the hell realm exists and this is what is occurring there and this is why it exists. It's not something that I would think of as a silly idea. I just understand that it's there for a reason and that's what needs to happen in order for an individual to extinguish their unwholesome karma.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, looks like Samantha's next. Go ahead, ma'am.
I was just wondering if coming to the realization or understanding of the Four Noble Truths is, if you're able to do that in all the realms, or is it mostly just the human realm, or is that the realm that's the easiest or the one that you would be more likely to come to that?
The human realm and the heavenly realm is where you have the opportunity to gain wisdom of the Four Noble Truths. In the hell realm, afflicted spirit, in the animal realm, you don't have the ability because the mind can't cultivate wisdom enough to be able to do that.
So you can get to the heavenly realm without already understanding the Four Noble Truths?
Yes, there's the ability to go from the hell realm straight up into heaven. It's very rare that this occurs, but there is the possibility for that to occur. You can even go from the animal realm, the afflicted spirit, or the human realm straight into the heavenly realm. But you don't have to know the Four Noble Truths in order to get into the heavenly realm.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Okay, Marcy, go ahead.
I was just about ready to lower my hand, Teacher David. You answered my question.
Okay, perfect. Let's see if this individual has a question. Sorry, I don't see your name there. All right. So Chris had a question. He says, how is it that an enlightened being still has preferences if experiences are neither agreeable nor disagreeable? Thank you, Teacher David. So a preference would be that an individual can be completely content and peaceful no matter how this particular thing is occurring, but they prefer for one thing or another. So for example, an enlightened being would prefer to be around people who are polite, kind, friendly, and respectful. That's the preference. But when they experience people who are impolite, unkind, unfriendly, and disrespectful, they're completely fine with that too, right? They're not shaken up by things like what just occurred, right? So an individual would prefer that we have a nice class and that, people don't do things like what just happened. But an individual can maintain their contentedness regardless of what is or isn't happening. So someone might have a preference for a particular type of food, but they can be completely content with eating any and all foods. By the time you get to enlightenment, there's no central desire in your mind, but you might prefer chocolate cake over apple pie, for example. And when you can eat both of these things and be completely content, or eat neither of these things and be completely content and joyful regardless. So the preference is just what the mind would prefer, but realizing that there is impermanence and things are not going to always be a certain way, and that there is impermanence. And now whenever there's any impermanence, you just handle it. You just make a couple of decisions, and then you move on from whatever is happening that needs to transpire. So that little thing that we just had was actually a really good example of how, I would prefer that people don't, play music and play videos, but every once in a while there's people that come in to these Zoom sessions thinking that that's going to somehow create some beneficial result for them. So when they come in, it's like, oh, okay, well, they're doing that, so we'll just kind of change a couple settings and then move on. But there's no agitation or frustration or irritation or annoyance. The mind can maintain its contentedness, but there's the preference of, it'd be nice to just have the students who are participating in the class and doing so in a way that we typically do. But you can maintain your contentedness regardless. So that's what a preference is that you prefer it to be one way or the other, potentially, but the mind can be content no matter how it is. And then that's what the preference is, that there's not a craving that's producing discontentedness. Okay, let me see if we have any questions anywhere else. All right. Not seeing any other questions anywhere. So I'm going to move on to the next one, which is chapter 13. It looks like Marcy would like to volunteer to read that one. So go ahead, ma'am. Actually, let me just do one thing before you read that, Marcy.
All right, take your time.
I'm going to set it up so that you guys can turn on your videos if you like, because it's kind of nice when you guys have that ability. Let's see. There we go. So you guys should be open to starting your video if you like. There we go. All right. So now should be good to go, Marcy.
Thank you. 4 qualities of a wholesome person. Monks. One who possesses 4 qualities can be understood to be a wholesome person. What for? Here, monks, a wholesome person does not disclose the faults of others, even when asked about them, how much less than when not asked, but when he is asked about them, then lead on by questions. He speaks about the faults of others with gaps and omissions, not fully or in detail. It can be understood this individual is a wholesome person. Again, a wholesome person discloses the virtues of others even when not asked about them. How much more than when asked? But when he is asked about them, then lead on by question. He speaks about the virtues of others without gaps and omissions, fully and in detail. Fully in detail. It can be understood this individual is a wholesome person. Again, a wholesome person discloses his own faults even when not asked about them. How much more than when asked? But when he is asked about them, then he lead on by questions. He speaks about his own faults without gaps and omissions, fully and in detail. It can be understood this individual is a wholesome person. Again, a wholesome person does not disclose his own virtues even when asked about them. How much less than when not asked? But when he is asked about them, then, led on by questions, he speaks about his own virtues with gaps and omissions, not fully or in detail. It can be understood this individual is a wholesome person. One who possesses these 4 qualities can be understood as a wholesome person.
Okay, thank you, Marcy. So the Buddha is teaching you how to be a wholesome person. That's what he's doing all throughout his teachings, how to get to that point where the mind's purified and you're making wise decisions and experiencing only wholesome results. And one of those wholesome results is that the mind's going to be enlightened, where you're only experiencing peace, calm, serenity, and contentedness with joy, no matter what is occurring or what isn't occurring in your day-to-day life. But also, you're going to not only need to know how to function for yourself through these natural laws to be able to get to the point where the mind's making only wise decisions, but you're also going to need to make decisions about other individuals to include in your life, in terms of like a boss or friends or family or life partner, people like this, maybe a roommate that you're considering to live with you. You would like to be able to have some wisdom to make decisions about who to include in your life. And you would like to do that without any kind of judgment or looking down on that person, but just using your discernment in your wise decision making. So here the Buddha is giving you guidance of how to function as a wholesome person, one aspect of that. But all of his teachings are really guiding you towards that. So here he's referring to about essentially how you don't slander or gossip other people, and that when you are in a position to talk about their wholesome qualities, that you're willing to talk about the wholesome qualities of another individual. So this first one here, he's talking about a wholesome person does not disclose the faults of others. This would essentially be like slander and gossiping somebody. If you were to do that, it's only going to produce unwholesome results for you. And if you didn't do those things, the Buddha is saying, okay, this is a wholesome person. But keep in mind, in a professional environment, you're going to sometimes need to provide guidance or understanding, maybe like an employee review or something like this. And it all comes down to your intention. If you were just out and about with your friends and family and you're like bad-mouthing people and slandering people, their only intention there is to degrade this person, push them down, and the mind's conceit is maybe trying to look good in front of other people. But if you're in an environment where you're in a professional field and you're providing some kind of input for an employee review or something like this, your intention is to build this person up and help them become more and more successful in their profession and in their career. And that's the difference. And the way that you would do this is you would do this where maybe you talk a few things that are actually that are positive, right? You might say, oh, I noticed that Bob or Barbara are very dedicated and committed and loyal to the company, and they make lots of decisions that are ensuring that the product or the service or the project gets delivered on time, right? So you might talk about these things. But then you might say on the tail side, you might say, the suggestion that I have for this person would be that when they're initiating a project, that they involve other people, where rather than just do all the work themselves, that they solicit input and ideas from other people to be able to more fully understand how to deliver the project in a successful way. Right? So you're communicating in a positive and uplifting way because your intention behind it is not to harm. Whereas if you were just out there gossiping and slandering people, the intention is to harm. Where you can actually talk about people's challenges and things that they need to improve in a positive and uplifting way. And that's what's actually going to lead to wholesome results in these situations. So when you read these teachings, it's important to understand that the Buddha is not teaching this black and white, that there's this middle way here, that yes, in general, it's unwise to disclose people's faults in a personal environment where your intention is to harm. But then in a professional environment, you can have employee reviews and things like this, where you might be having the intention to build this person up and give them some insight that's going to be helpful and motivating. And the way to do that would be to share a few of the positive qualities that you see, some of the wholesome things that this person's doing, and then share some areas for them to improve. And this way, your feedback is balanced and it's uplifting and helpful for this individual to develop their career. Then the Buddha says a wholesome person discloses the virtues, that they do disclose the virtues, that they talk about the positive sides of an individual. And that's what I was just describing, right? That you're going to talk about this individual in a positive way, right? Not just in the professional environment, but also in a personal environment too. You can talk about like, oh, I noticed such and such has so much loving kindness, or they're so generous, or they're so friendly, they're so polite, they're so respectful, that you're willing to talk about others in a positive way. And that's what a wholesome person would do. But then when it comes to your own shortcomings, your own, the word fault is being used here. The Buddha is saying that you would be willing to talk about those if you're a wholesome person. And what he means by that is that in order to get to enlightenment, you're going to need to become a better and better individual. You're going to need to be doing more and more wholesome things. And in order to be able to accomplish that, you're going to need to be able to disclose the things that you're struggling with and that you're challenged with. So you're going to need to go to a teacher and you're going to need to say, hey, this is where I'm challenged. This is where I'm struggling. This is where, I'm noticing that I'm not making wise decisions. Can you help me? So a wholesome person would be an individual who's working towards continuous growth and development in their life. And they're going to be willing to disclose those shortcomings and those challenges to someone like a teacher. But you don't need to go out and tell, other people about the things that you're doing. You don't need to go talk to your friends and other people because they're not in a position to help you. But for an individual that is looking to grow and develop, who's a wholesome person, you'd be willing to disclose your challenges and difficulties without omissions or gaps. That's what the Buddha is saying, so that you can get feedback and help to be able to improve. And then the other side of this is he's talking about for you to become a more and more wholesome person, that you don't disclose your virtues. If you were going around and you were just talking and blabbing and being boastful and arrogant and prideful about all the things that you've accomplished, this is going to come from the mind's ego, that conceit. And as people experience that from you, they're going to tend to push you aside. They're not going to be interested in being around you, and it's going to produce unwholesome results in your life. So you're not generally interested in going out into the world and being boastful and arrogant and prideful about the things that you're accomplishing in life. Just move forward with those things based on wise decisions. But again, you're going to be in situations sometimes, like maybe you're doing an employee interview and they ask you about, some of your qualifications. So you're going to need to build credibility with these people that you don't know to see whether or not they're going to be interested to hire you. So you can talk about your qualifications and the things you've accomplished in life without being arrogant and boastful and prideful. And that would lead to wholesome results. Whereas if in that interview you were arrogant and boastful and prideful, they're probably not going to be interested in hiring you. So you would like to talk about some of the things that you've done that are beneficial and helpful, but do it in a humble way. And that's what's going to produce the beneficial results for you. So let me know what questions you guys have here. This next chapter that we're going to end up skipping over, it's essentially the same exact thing, chapter 14, but the Buddha is talking about those same qualities in terms of an unwholesome person. That an unwholesome person would disclose the faults of others, right? That they're going to be out there gossiping and slandering. That they do not expose the virtues of others. That an unwholesome person does not disclose their own faults, and an unwholesome person discloses their virtues. So it's just the opposite. So let me know what questions you guys have on either of these two chapters. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. So it looks like Samantha has a question. Go ahead, ma'am.
Concerning number one, disclosing faults of others. So I know if you have nothing good to say, you shouldn't say anything. But in the event of say, someone asking your recommendations for, say, a babysitter or someone to date, and you know that they have a history of unwholesome behavior like abuse or, just to be extreme, rape, something like that, and you don't have something nice to say about that person, you can't really be uplifting in that situation for the person that you're giving, say, feedback on. Would it be more important to be protective of the person who is asking the question, or best just to say, I don't really have anything good to say about this person? Like, how would you handle that?
Yeah, that's one way to do it. You could say, I don't have anything good to say about this individual. That's one way to say it. Another thing you can do, which is more of what I recommend, is you direct the person towards understanding what it is that they need to understand, which allows them to be able to find the details for themselves. So, for example, using what you described, like someone's done rape or some criminal activity like this, and someone's asking you your opinion of this person, and you know this, what I would say is, from my understanding, this person has had certain challenges. You might decide to look at a criminal background check and see if there's anything that is something that you would be concerned about, right? So you're like pointing them in the direction for them to be able to find the truth for themselves. I'll give you an example of this in our life. That one time my wife's sister, who's now passed away, she came to my wife and I, and she asked us if her husband was cheating on her. And we actually knew the answer because we saw her husband with a woman at one point. And she came to us and asked us, is he cheating on us? And what my wife said to her is, she said, sister, I suggest you keep your eyes open and you look for details that will help you determine whether or not that's true or not. Right? So then about 3 to 5 days later, our sister was in her car looking through her car, and she found a pair of underwear under her seat that weren't her underwear, and it was a female's underwear, and she knew from that. Right. So rather than us telling her like, oh yeah, your husband's cheating on you and this is who we saw him with and blah, 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 we're slandering and gossiping this person. We're the deliverer of bad news. And now our sister would have to believe us because she doesn't have any evidence for herself to be able to see whether this is true or false. And now we're coming in the middle of these two people, our sister and her husband, and now we're the ones who are kind of like giving this information without any kind of real tangible things that our sister can independently verify. So my wife was able to say in a way that sister could find her information that she needed to come to the conclusion herself. So in each one of these situations, they're a little bit different, and you're going to need to be skillful. This is where if you don't have craving, desire, attachment, if you don't have anger, hatred, and ill will, and you don't have ignorance, you can be skillful in each one of these situations and figure out a way to direct this person towards something that they're going to be able to see for themselves without having to slander someone yourself and without them having to believe you. That's what you would like to be able to share with an individual.
Okay, thank you very much.
Oh yeah, you're welcome. Welcome, Samantha. Looks like Vibhav has a question from upstairs.
Thank you, David. I was just wondering, in this situation, on situation like this, is it not wise to be proactive in to like your wife or your wife to let your sister know in other situations where you see something as somebody has done unwise, and the concerned family or friends or whoever should be told like in a proactive manner that they may want to look at these things happening. So like, child abuse or something, rather than waiting for somebody to ask the question that, do you see anything wrong here?
Yeah, each situation is going to be a bit different, and that's where you need to look at it and weigh your options. In the situation that we had just found out the night before, because I told my wife, I said, I suspect there's something going on here. And it was actually an interesting part of our life. We actually dressed in all black. We stayed up until like 2 or 3 a.m. in the morning because we knew that this individual was going to be leaving at that time. And we were like on a black motorbike and we were hiding in the shadows. And then like when he came by, we like followed him and stuff like this. And we had just found out that night. And our sister asked us the very next day. She just like walked up to us and asked us. And we didn't think to be proactive and actually go talk to her about it because we weren't interested in being the bearers of bad news. Like she needed to be able to see these things for herself. But there could be situations where maybe you do need to be proactive in these kinds of things. And that's like a case-by-case basis that you need to look at it. You need to be sure that you can't be pegged as the troublemaker, so to speak, and that you're not the one that's like stepping in and creating trouble, because in their minds, other people are going to see it that way. And now you're going to have this unwholesome karma coming back to you. So if we went to our sister and we told her what we saw, we don't have any evidence about it, potentially the husband could have, looked at us as being the troublemaker, and now they're going to try to cause harm to us, where we did it and orchestrated it in such a way that sister was able to be the initiator of that. But there could be situations like what you're describing, like child abuse or something like this, that you need to initiate this kind of thing and go to the government perhaps, or go to a trusted family member, but you're going to need to do that in a very skillful way to ensure that you're not going to be pegged as the troublemaker. And that's where your wisdom comes in to be able to do that. And if somebody was in those kinds of situations and has never handled one of those before, they could come to somebody like me, explain all the details of what they're experiencing, and then I could give them guidance on what to do when there's an actual real situation occurring, rather than just talking hypothetically.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so let me see if we have any questions anywhere else. Looks like we have something coming in from Mayu Lee on YouTube. Teacher, what about venting to your mom about your siblings? Is that considered slander, even though it's true? Yes, it is. Because whatever you're venting about, I don't know if this is like a real story or not, or whether it's just hypothetical, but if somebody was venting about their siblings, essentially what they're doing is they're exposing their own cravings, desires, attachments. They have expectations of their siblings. They want them to be a certain way, and now they're damaging that person's reputation to mom. Where in reality, what would be better is for you to get rid of those cravings, desires, and expectations, and now your mind can be peaceful and joyful. Because venting to mom about brother or sister not meeting your expectations isn't going to solve the problem. That's just part of the problem, is that now the mind is unwise and is practicing gossip and slander, where mom can't go to brother and sister and force or control them to do things your way. That's all that would potentially the mind be doing there. And even if mom could do that, it's not going to solve the underlying problem, which is the mind craving and having expectations for brother and sister to be a certain way. So the better use of an individual's time is not to vent to mom and produce unwholesome karma through slander and gossip, but instead work on one's own mind to eliminate the craving, desire, the wants and expectations that are producing the urge to vent these things to mom. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions anywhere. So as I mentioned, we're going to skip over this next one because it's exactly the same thing, just in the opposite way of reading it. So that's what that 14 is. And now we'll go to chapter 15. Is there someone who would like to read this one?
I could take it. Thanks.
Okay, sure, Vibhav. This chapter 15 for you.
Thank you. With an unaffected mind, deciding and compassionate. Faguna, if anyone speaks critical in your presence, you should abandon any desires and any thoughts based on the household life. And herein you should train thus, my mind will be unaffected, and I shall speak no evil words. I shall recite compassionate for his welfare, with a mind of loving kindness, without inner hate. That is how you should train, Faguna. If anyone should give you a blow with his hand, with a clod, with a stick, or with a knife, you should abandon any desires and any thoughts based on the household life. And herein you should train thus, my mind will be unaffected, and I shall speak no evil words. I shall recite compassionate for his welfare, with a mind of loving kindness, without inner hate. That is how you should train, Faguna. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Vibhav. So this is actually really nice discourse to connect into what we were just talking about with Mayu Li, is that no matter what people are doing in your presence, no matter how they're talking to you, no matter how they're treating you through their verbal or their bodily actions, the Buddha is saying, don't allow your mind to be hateful. Because as long as you allow your mind to do that, it's harming you. So here the Buddha says, if someone speaks critical in your presence, meaning they speak to you in a degrading and diminishing way, you should abandon any desires or thoughts that long you're yearning based on the household life. Because essentially what he's saying is abandon those things that you would do as an unenlightened being, right? Because these people that he's talking to are essentially ordained practitioners, and now they're entering into this life to become enlightened. And in that household life, they were unenlightened, and they might have, when someone speaks critical, they might have been angry and bitter and harsh and hostile back. So the Buddha is saying, the way that you treated people in the past, where you were bitter and harsh and hostile back when someone's critical to you, the Buddha is saying it's unwise to do that. He's saying that you should train your mind to be unaffected and speak no evil words. Have compassion and loving kindness for this person. Because even though they're being critical and they're speaking in unkind ways, there's no need for you to be hateful and vindictive and resentful towards this person. And that's if somebody was speaking in a certain way. That's what he's describing here. But then he goes into the actions part, and he says, okay, if somebody should hit you with their hand or a clod or a stick or with a knife, abandon any kind of ability for the mind to be affected by that. Don't allow the mind to be affected by that. Don't utter any evil words, because that's just keeping the hatred going, right? Like, you can't eliminate a person who hates you with your hate. If somebody hates you and they're coming at you with words or with actions, you're not going to eliminate that by you being hateful back. So this is a certain amount of unwholesome karma that might be coming back to you, and now you need to extinguish that by choosing not to be hateful back. If hatred is coming towards you and you put out hatred, then you're just going to have more hatred come back to you. You need to think about that analogy I used with the rubber ball. If somebody picks up the rubber ball and throws it around the room, and you pick up the rubber ball and you throw it around the room, and then they pick it up and throw it around the room, next thing you know, you got all these rubber balls bouncing around the room. But if someone picks up the rubber ball of anger and they throw it around the room, and you just watch it roll to the corner and lose its energy, then there's no more anger that you're putting out. So therefore, it's not going to be coming back to you. This is what you need to do in all your personal and professional relationships. That when people are bitter and harsh and hostile or vindictive, or even the slightest little thing, even they're putting expectations on you, maybe they're being sarcastic with you, saying things like this, you can make choices and decisions to not do that. And it might even be a relationship that if you're not committed to it, you might need to move on from it and choose to no longer be in that relationship. But you need to make sure that you train your mind to not be affected by this bitterness and harshness that's coming at you, that you don't speak any evil words, and that you have this compassion for that person's welfare. Compassion is the concern for their misfortune. What you can have here, if someone is having some bitter and harsh and hostile words or actions, is have this compassion, concern for their misfortune, meaning, oh, it's so unfortunate that they haven't learned about the natural law of karma, that they don't understand by being bitter, harsh, and hostile with their speech or their actions, it's harming them. It doesn't need to harm your mind. So you can just maintain this compassion for them, the concern for their misfortune. And then have that loving kindness, which is a genuine interest in seeing them be well. And then that'll help you to not have any inner hate, because that's just going to harm your own mind, and you're not interested in that. So do you guys have any questions on this chapter? Okay, it looks like Chris has a question here in YouTube. When Gotama Buddha says, you shall train thus, is he referring to telling the mind to do those things, such as repeating the phrases he mentions? What he's saying here is this is the way to practice, that you're going to need to practice being unaffected. And of course, your mind's not going to be able to do that, especially when you first get on the path, or if you have certain cravings, desires, attachments. What he's saying is this is the direction to head, that head towards the direction of abandoning your cravings, desires, and attachments. Abandon any thoughts of causing this harm back to that individual, and instead practice in such a way that you're working closer and closer towards being unaffected, and practicing so that you're not having evil words go back to that person, and having this compassion and loving kindness. So you guys have heard me talk in the past about how I had to extinguish my unwholesome karma with my wife, where there was a period of time where I was bitter, harsh, and hostile with her. And then when I started transforming my mind, she was still bitter and harsh and hostile to me. And I needed to, in some cases, bite my tongue, right? And bite my lip and walk away when she was being bitter, harsh, and hostile, because I still had a certain amount of craving in there where I really wanted to say something to her. And I could feel that anger starting to arise. But no, I cut that off and I walked away, where before I would have sat there and argued and been bitter and harsh and hostile. So the Buddha is essentially, what a Buddha is doing is they're setting out this line, and they're saying, here, this is what you're working towards. This is the goal. This is the objective of what it is that's going to help you to get to enlightenment. And now if you're somewhere here, you're now striving to work towards that. So he's sharing with you of what you should work towards, how you should develop your practice in order to get to enlightenment. And you need to realize that in all cases, right now, you're not going to be able to do what it is that he's sharing. But if you practice in that direction, more and more you will be able to get to that point where you can practice in this way. Okay, so let's move on to the next one, which is chapter 16. Is there someone who would like to read this? All right, Chris, go ahead, sir.
Training a mind filled with loving kindness, without hostility or ill will. Monks, there are these 5 courses of speech that others may use when they address you. Their speech may be timely or untimely, true or untrue, gentle or harsh, connected with benefit or unbeneficial, spoken with a mind of loving kindness or with inner hate. Herein, monks, you should train thus. Our minds will remain unaffected, and we shall speak no evil words. We shall reside compassionate for their welfare, with a mind of loving kindness, without inner hate. We shall reside enveloping that person with a mind filled with loving kindness. And starting with him, we shall reside enveloping the all-encompassing world with a mind filled with loving kindness, abundant, joyful, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. That is how you should train, monks. Monks, Suppose a man came with crimson, turmeric, indigo, or carmine, and said, I shall draw pictures and make pictures appear on empty space. What do you think, monks? Could that man draw pictures and make pictures appear on empty space? No, Venerable Sir. Why is that? Because empty space is formless and invisible. He cannot possibly draw pictures there or make pictures appear there. Eventually, the man will reap only tiredness and disappointment. So too, monks, there are these 5 courses of speech that others may use when they address you. Herein, monks, you should train thus. Our minds will remain unaffected, and we shall speak no evil words. We shall reside compassionate for their welfare, with a mind of loving kindness, without inner hate. We shall reside enveloping them with a mind filled with loving kindness, and starting with them, we shall reside enveloping the all-encompassing world with a mind filled with loving kindness, abundant, joyful, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. That is how you should train monks. The Buddha also spoke several other similes, a simile of a man who came with a hoe and a basket and said, I shall make this great earth to be without earth, a simile of a man with a blazing grass torch and said, I shall heat up and burn away the river Ganges with this blazing grass torch. Eventually that man will reap only tiredness and disappointment. Monks, even if criminals were to sever you savagely limb by limb with a 2-handed saw, he who gave rise to a mind of hate towards them would not be practicing my teachings. Herein, monks, you should train thus. Our minds will remain unaffected, and we shall speak no evil words. We shall reside compassionate for their welfare, with a mind of loving kindness, without inner hate. We shall reside enveloping them with a mind filled with loving kindness, and starting with them, we shall reside enveloping the all-encompassing world with a mind filled with loving kindness, abundant, joyful, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. That is how you should train monks. Monks, if you keep this advice on the simile of the saw constantly in mind, do you see any course of speech, insignificant or significant, that you could not endure? No, Venerable Sir. Therefore, monks, you should keep this advice on the simile of the saw constantly in mind. That will lead to your welfare and peacefulness for a long time.
Okay, thank you, sir. So essentially what the Buddha is getting at here is that people are going to speak to you in either using the 5 factors of well-spoken speech, which you're probably learning and practicing to a certain degree, but then also people can speak to you without the 5 factors of well-spoken speech. Even when you're enlightened, this is going to occur. And what the Buddha is saying is, under no circumstances are you ever interested in being hateful and vindictive back, right? Even in a personal relationship or professional relationship, no matter how people are talking to you, you need to train your mind that you understand what's wise and you only speak in that way. No matter what people are doing in the world around you, only speak in the way that the Buddha teaches you, because you're not going to extinguish your unwholesome karma by being bitter and harsh and hostile back to somebody. Even sometimes in some personal relationships, we might just be a little bit sarcastic or kind of poking and prodding our life partner or people around us. You'd like to eliminate all of that. You need to rise to this higher consciousness where the mind is functioning as a wise human being, because the more that you do these kinds of things where you're poking and prodding at people, that stuff's just going to come back to you. So you would like to get to a point where you're practicing wisely, particularly if you have a life partner or you have children or your parents, your professional life, because not only is it helpful for you, but it's helpful for the people around you, because when they see that you're functioning in a more and more wholesome way, they're going to tend to follow you. So your life partner, your children, your coworkers, your people around you, your neighbors, when they see that you're functioning in more and more of a wise way, people are going to learn that from you, just without you having to directly teach them or give them any advice or guidance. They're just going to see how you conduct yourself, and people are going to start to function like that around you. So the Buddha is going through a lot of details here and explaining different things to be able to help you see what he's illustrating. But essentially what he's illustrating is that in no situation would you ever be interested in being bitter and harsh and hostile or having ill will towards anyone, including this person who's being savagely dismembered from limb to limb to limb, that you would like to just maintain your mind without hostility and without ill will, maintaining that loving kindness and compassion for all beings. Do you guys have any questions on this particular discourse? Let me know, putting that in Facebook, YouTube, or in Zoom. Okay, looks like we have some things coming in on YouTube. If people bother you when you didn't ask for engagement, it might be smart to have a different tone. Nobody's bothering you. If you think that people are bothering you, this is because you haven't understood the Four Noble Truths. I suggest you use my resources on YouTube or the books and things that I share, podcasts, so that you can understand that it's not other people bothering you. And if you think that way, that's because you still have wrong view. And by having that wrong view, now you might feel like you need to talk in a different tone to them because you're trying to get them to stop doing something. You're having a certain craving and a certain expectation of wanting them to be a certain way. And that's not going to lead to your peacefulness and joy. The goal of this path isn't to change other people. It's to transform your own mind. So I suggest you go back and you learn from Volume 1, Chapter 4. You can look at the videos, the podcasts, things like this, so you can understand what right view is, so that you can understand that it's not other people that are bothering you. It's your own cravings, desires, attachments within your own mind. Chris is asking here on YouTube, is it beneficial to take time in the day to remind the mind and think about the being unaffected, speaking no evil words, residing compassionate for his welfare with a mind of loving kindness? You could. That's called reflection, right? That if you're having challenges in this area, if you don't have loving kindness, you don't have compassion for people, and you would like to bring that up in your mind, of course, you've got loving kindness meditation. That's what you would like to be doing at least once a day. I suggest people do it in the morning, because then it kind of fills up your mind and you go out into the world being loving and kind. But at any point during your day, if you would like to reflect and have thoughts of loving kindness and compassion towards others, you could do that, and it'll help bring up the loving kindness to be more in the mind, kind of more in the forefront of your mind. Because by the time you get to enlightenment, there's no situation where you couldn't be loving and kind. It doesn't matter what's occurring in your day-to-day life, you can be loving and kind with all individuals. So you're going to need to get to the point where that loving kindness is really permeating in the mind. And the loving kindness meditation is going to help you with that, but also the reflection, the inward looking eye, to train the mind to understand that these beings, you can be loving and kind with others. So an individual saying, you can find bothering people in every town. This isn't actually true. I apologize. You haven't learned the Four Noble Truths. It's not other people that are bothering you. If you're being bothered, again, you have wrong view. You need to go back to Volume 1, Chapter 4, and look at the videos or podcasts and things like that, so that you can understand what is right view. Because as long as you have wrong view, you'll never actually get to enlightenment. So you need to get this breakthrough of understanding the Four Noble Truths, and that's where you can get access to those teachings. Okay, so I don't see any other questions anywhere, so I'm going to move on to chapter 17 here. Would somebody like to read this one? Okay, looks like Marcy and then Samantha. We'll just take you guys in order, and then Keely after that.
Thank you, Teacher David. Reside with a mind of a newly arrived bride. Monks, when a bride is first brought into the home, whether at night or during the day, at first she sets up with a diligent sense of moral wrongdoing and moral concern towards her mother-in-law, her father-in-law, her husband, and even the slaves, workers, and servants. But after some time, as a result of living together and intimacy with them, she says to her mother-in-law, her father-in-law, her husband, "Go away. What do you know?" So too, when some monk here has gone forth from the household life into the homelessness, whether by night or during the day, At first, he sets up a diligent sense of moral wrongdoing and moral concern toward the male ordained practitioners, the female ordained practitioners, the male household practitioners, the female household practitioners, and even toward the monastery workers and novices. But after some time, as a result of living together and intimacy with them, he says even to his teacher and his preceptor, "Go away, what do you know? Therefore, monks, you should train yourself thus. We will reside with a mind like that of a newly arrived bride. It is in such a way that you should train yourself."
Okay, thank you, Marcy. So here, what the Buddha is talking about is how when you kind of like first go into a new environment, you might be on your best behavior, so to speak. But then after you've been there for like a month or two or three, you kind of slack off and you start being bitter and harsh and hostile to people. And you're like, what do you know? Go away from me, right? So he's giving this great analogy of a newly arrived bride, right? And you can put your mind in that mindset that if you were a newly arrived bride where you were moving into the home of your in-laws, and now you might be on your best behavior for a few months. But then after time, you might start getting to the point where you kind of resentful and pushing people away. And the Buddha is saying that this would be unwise to do this. And he's saying the same thing happens when people are on the path to enlightenment. When you become a new student, you might be on your best behavior with your teacher and your fellow community members. But then over time, you might kind of push people away and like, what do you know? Like, go away from me, right? But instead, what the Buddha is saying is he's encouraging you to reside with that mind like a newly arrived bride. That when you're interacting with the community members, you're interacting with your teacher, that you always practice the good, wholesome moral conduct. What he's talking about here, we haven't really talked about this much yet in this particular program, which is moral wrongdoing and moral concern. What moral wrongdoing is, you need this quality. This is where you understand what's wise and unwise in terms of your moral conduct. What moral concern is that you're concerned not to do anything that's unwise. If you didn't have moral wrongdoing and you didn't have moral concern, it means you're unwise about the moral conduct that leads to any wholesome or unwholesome results. If you didn't have moral concern, you could care less about how your decisions about your moral conduct impact other people. And we might have been in a place like that at some point in our life where we didn't know, we didn't have the wisdom of what was wise or unwise about moral conduct. And we could care less about how we interacted with other people and how they were experiencing our conduct. But as you become wiser and wiser and you understand this path, you start developing this moral wrongdoing where you know what's wise and unwise, and you develop this moral concern that you're disinterested in doing anything that would be unwise in your moral conduct because you understand anything that you put out is going to come back to you. So you would like to develop moral wrongdoing and moral concern as part of your journey to enlightenment. And the Buddha is saying, stay diligent with this when you're talking with your teacher, because that individual is there to help you. Your teacher shouldn't be wanting or expecting anything from you. They should just be helping you out of the kindness of their heart. And if you were bitter, harsh, and hostile to this individual, that's the individual who doesn't want anything from you or expect anything from you. They're just there to try to help you to improve and become a better and better person. And it would be unwise to be bitter, harsh, and hostile to that individual, because that's the individual that's going to help you to be able to get to enlightenment. So the Buddha is describing this newly arrived bride. So being that way in relationship to your teacher to be able to help you get to enlightenment. But you can apply this in other parts of your life too. Like say you have a new job and you have a new boss. Always function as a newly arrived bride, right? Don't get to the point where you're complacent with the way that you function in your moral conduct. Or say you have a roommate and a roommate moves in with you. Don't allow your mind to become complacent, to be bitter, harsh, and hostile. Be a newly arrived bride with this person. Or say you have a college professor or something like this. It's important to be a newly arrived bride in that relationship too. So while the Buddha is describing this in terms of a teacher getting to enlightenment, you can apply this in all aspects of your life. A landlord, right? You have a certain landlord, maintain your moral conduct around this person. This is going to be very helpful for you as you make your way forward in life, because you shouldn't have any place in your life for an unwholesome relationship. Bitterness and harshness and hostility, you need to purge all of that from your own mind, and you need to purge it from your relationships so that you get to a point where all your relationships are sustaining, fulfilling, and long-lasting, that you have nothing but respect and gratitude and appreciation for the people that are around you, that you're not being bitter and harsh and hostile in any way whatsoever. You're not interested in any personal or professional relationships with bitterness and harshness and hostility. And that's how you do it, is you maintain this newly arrived bride mindset in all these different relationships. So let me know what questions you guys have here. This is chapter 17 of volume 8. Okay, we have some more coming in here. So this is going back to the individual that hasn't understood the Four Noble Truths. They're saying, for example, those wanting change or money, they're not doing anything to annoy you or frustrate you. That's an expectation that this person shouldn't want that they shouldn't want money or change from you. You need to understand that that person is in a certain place in their life, and that's what they're choosing to do, is ask people for money or for change, but they're not annoying you. They're not the one who's causing any kind of bothering of you. They're not bothering you. They're just asking you a question, and you have a choice to make. You can say yes or no, or you can say nothing at all. You can just continue walking. But your mind being bothered, that's because of your craving, desire, attachment. That's your expectation of that person. And then from that same person, thinking logical or emotional, when being patient and grateful, with prayer, you will find a way to avoid communication walls and immature. So unfortunately, you're not asking a question here. You're just making a statement. So if you're interested in learning with me, I would encourage you to ask questions, because then you're going to be able to learn and grow and develop. But it sounds like you haven't studied the very first teaching from the Buddha yet, which is the Four Noble Truths. And this is why you're misunderstanding the path to enlightenment. And now you're actually making a statement instead of asking a question. I would encourage you to ask questions and get help. That's what your time is here. So Mayulis asks, this mind tends to have more loving kindness and compassion for those that are angry. This mind knows that those individuals suffer the most. Is this unwise, as this mind should treat everyone the same? So that's understandable that that's where you're at now. But yes, you would like to get to the point where your mind is having loving kindness and compassion for everyone equally, that there isn't one person or one group of person that you love more or less, but you just have love and kindness and compassion for everybody. That's what you would like to work towards. So your mind's trying to find that middle, and it can swing like this as you're trying to find that middle. So just bring that more and more into the middle. Okay, so I'm not seeing any other questions. So Samantha volunteered for this next chapter, which is chapter 18. Would you like to read this one, Samantha?
Thank you. 5 factors of well-spoken speech. Monks, possessing 5 factors, speech is well-spoken, not badly spoken. It is blameless and beyond reproach by the wise. What 5? It is spoken at the proper time. What is said is true. It is spoken gently. What is said is beneficial. It is spoken with a mind of loving kindness. Possessing these 5 factors, speech is well spoken, not badly spoken. It is blameless and beyond reproach by the wise.
Okay, thank you, Samantha. So this is the 5 factors of well-spoken speech that I teach in all the foundational programs, because we can cause a lot of harm through our speech. And whenever you're putting out harm, this harm will come back to you. And you would like to dial this in closer and closer, along with all the other factors of the Eightfold Path. In the Eightfold Path, right speech is all about eliminating lying, slander, harsh speech, and frivolous speech. And you'd like to work on those 4 first. But then in more detail, this is a connected teaching that plugs into the Eightfold Path that gives you more detail about how to practice in such a way that will be wise and helpful and beneficial, because you're not causing harm through your speech. And then that way harm isn't coming back to you. So speaking at the proper time has 3 aspects to it. It's ensuring that your mind is prepared to talk, that you're not angry and bitter and harsh and hostile yourself. Because if you're angry, bitter, harsh, and hostile yourself, it's not the proper time to talk, because that's all that's going to come out of your mind. You would also like to check in and make sure the other person's mind, it's the proper time for them to talk. If it's not the proper time for them to talk, their mind's going to be bitter, harsh, and hostile, or maybe they're just not interested in hearing from you, right? I had a recent situation where a student said that they were interested in hearing what I had to share, and they were interested in learning and getting some help. And ultimately, as we got into it, they just weren't interested. You could tell that they were kind of pushing back, and they weren't really actively engaged in learning and trying to understand what it is that they needed to understand. So I got to the point where I was just like, maybe it's better we not talk now. And I just kind of excused myself from the conversation and moved on. So not only are you looking for the ensuring that your mind is the proper time, but also the other person's mind. And the other person's mind could be angry or bitter or harsh or hostile, or it could just be simply that they're just not interested in hearing what it is that you have to say, and they're just not interested in talking, and maybe their ego is arising and they're just not interested. Even though in the beginning of the conversation, they might have said they were interested, somewhere along the lines, the mind switched and it wasn't interested any longer, and that wouldn't be the proper time to talk. Another aspect of this is making sure that you're not interrupting people. If you're interrupting people, you don't like it when people do that to you, so it's important that you don't do that with other people. Then what is said is true. This is making sure that you're always speaking the truth. That if you're speaking falsehoods, this is going to get to the point where people can't trust you. They don't see you as being dependable and reliable. You would like to get to the point where you're only speaking the truth. Whereas if you've done a lot of lying, you know that it was very challenging for you to keep all those lies straight, and your mind was obsessively trying to figure out what you said to one person versus another. So you would like to practice in such a way that you're always speaking the truth with everybody around you. And your mind can be more at ease that way. And this also includes that you don't just kind of say things that you heard from somebody else that you didn't verify yourself. So it's not only not telling a deliberate lie, but it's also making sure that anything that you say that you've independently verified to ensure that you're speaking the truth. Then speaking gently is about your tone, your tempo, and your word choice, ensuring that you pay attention to your tone, your tempo, and your word choice as you're speaking, because you would like to speak gently in all situations. And that's what's going to produce the best results for you. Whereas if you're bitter and harsh and hostile, this is all just going to come back to you. So in whatever languages you speak, because we're using English here, but you might actually speak other languages. You might speak Chinese or Italian or French or things like this. You're going to need to pay attention to your tone, your tempo, and your word choice, and using things like thank you and please and yes sir, yes ma'am, things like this. And each language has those kinds of things that you can add in to ensure that you're speaking in a gentle way. Then there's beneficial. This would be like ensuring that the topic that you're talking about or the method that you're speaking clear and concise. This is the main thing, is that you're speaking clear and concise. It's not just about like whether this particular topic is beneficial or not, but you do need to look at that to a certain degree. It's not like there's a list of approved topics that are beneficial, but you need to just look to see, is it beneficial for you to be having this conversation? So in that example I talked about that I was recently talking with a student, not only was it not the proper time because their mind wasn't really prepared to learn, but it wasn't beneficial, that they weren't taking in what it is that they needed to learn in order to be able to understand and then make real changes in their life. So it wasn't beneficial to continue in that conversation. So mainly what you would like to look at is that you're clear and concise and precise in the way that you're speaking. That's what it means to speak beneficially. But in some situations, you might be looking at a certain topic or something like this. I had another student who messaged me recently, and she was asking about this certain thing, this certain text message she was going to send to a person and communicate certain thing. And in that text message, there was all these details that really didn't need to be there in that particular message. And I let them know that, this isn't necessarily beneficial to share this information. So you would like to look at those kinds of things, not just your spoken words, but also your text, your social media, and all these other things as well. And then you would like to wrap all of this in a mind of loving kindness, where you have this genuine interest in seeing all beings be well. The opposite of this would be inner hate. If you're speaking with inner hate, this is not going to produce the best results in your day-to-day life. So speaking at the proper time, what you say is true, gentle, beneficial, and with a mind of loving kindness, this is going to produce the best results for you. And now you can establish barami. the one who people listen to. Where over 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, you're speaking like this more and more. And now people will be able to see that you're not causing harm through the way that you speak, and you'll be more and more influential in your day-to-day relationships. That's what that word barami means. It's a Thai word that means the one who people listen to, that you can be influential in your day-to-day interactions with people. And it's going to take you time to build up your practice to speak in this way. In situations where you have attachment, where you have cravings, desires, attachments, you'll find it the most challenging to speak this way. So like in terms of like interrupting people, if you have a craving to hurry up and speak, you're going to find it challenging to speak in that way. Or if you're angry and bitter and harsh in your own mind, you're going to find it challenging to restrain the mind and pull it back. Or if this other person's angry and bitter and harsh, you might think that it's like, if you have a craving, you might feel like you have to go in there and fix them and get them to stop being angry, where you can't do that. So if you have craving or attachment to this person, it's going to be harder for you to speak at the proper time. When you speak lies, this is because the mind has a certain craving and it's wanting things to be a certain way. And now the mind will lie because if it tells the truth, it's not going to get what it wants. So there's an underlying craving there that's producing that. When you're not speaking gently, when the mind's speaking harsh, there's a craving, desire, attachment there. There's a longing, a yearning. The mind's wanting something, and it feels if I speak firm and harsh and hostile, I'll get what I want. And that's not what you're interested in. When you're not speaking beneficially, when you're kind of rambling, chit chat all over the place, there's a certain craving, desire, attachment there. And when you're speaking the opposite of a mind with loving kindness, when there's inner hate, that's because there's a craving, desire, attachment there. So everything the Buddha is teaching you, he's teaching you to eliminate craving, desire, attachment. He's showing you how to do that through all of his teachings, including here, that there's an underlying craving, desire, attachment when you're not practicing this particular wise conduct here. So let me know what questions you guys have. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Okay, looks like Vibhav has a question. Go ahead, sir.
David had a question on multiple times when we had this discussion and when they have said something, when I put something in words, it seems to come out in a way that is maybe not the right speech, but just changing the words itself seems to communicate whether you have say something with less craving or more craving. Why is that? Even if you're trying to not be have a craving when you're saying something, when the word choices seem to change the messaging that you're giving to the other person, and it seems to come out that you have that craving or attachment in that. And why is that the word choice comes out that way? And why does the word choice not reflect? Or why don't you have the right word choice when you're saying something that is actually reflecting what you would like to say and come out as not craving?
Yeah, it's coming from the mind's pollutions, the craving, anger, and ignorance. With your mind having those pollutions, it won't understand wise speech. So we might say, honey, I want you to go get some milk and eggs. That wanting, that longing, yearning. The mind has a certain lack of wisdom. There's that ignorance in there. And then it's communicating this craving. And now when you're, say, I know you don't do this, but say your life partner didn't go get the milks and eggs, and now you're angry because of it, because you wanted it, right? So you need to arise this wisdom to realize that it's unwise to go around and say, I want you to do this, I want you to do that, I want you to do this. Instead, it's like, hey, honey, would it be possible for you to go get some milk and eggs? Right? And now they're either going to say yes or no. And then since it's all interest, or you're interested to see if they would be willing to do this, then if they say no, you can still maintain your contentment. You say, okay, you're not able to go. Would it be possible for you to watch over this boiling water while I go to the store and get some milk and eggs? And they're like, yeah, I can do that for you. Okay, great. I'm going to go get some milk and eggs, right? And that's the choice that you're making in that situation. Whereas if you want it, now you're going to be upset when they don't do it. So the word choices that you use is indicative and reflective of how your mind thinks and how you process the world around you. So when you improve your word choice, it's going to improve your inner dialogue within your own mind and the way that you interact with the people around you. And you're going to see that when you change your word choice, it's also going to change the way the people around you function as well. That you'll be able to speak in a way that's more wise, and the people around you will respond to that in a better and better way.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, for this individual who's on YouTube still asking questions, you're asking about whether there's a spell to break generational curse. There's no such thing as cursing someone. I know that that's something that you might be believing right now, but everything that you experience is based on your own decisions. There's no ability to put a curse on you and force you to do any particular thing. That's coming from the mind's lack of wisdom to understand the natural law of karma. So as I suggested to you before, is to study the Four Noble Truths in Volume 1, Chapter 4, and all the resources that I share. I also suggest for you to learn Chapter 9, which is all about the natural law of karma. And then you'll understand what is truly happening in the world is based on this natural law of cause and effect, or action and result. Okay, Keely was interested in reading this next chapter. This is chapter 19. Let me just find Keely here. Go ahead, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Seeing one another in future lives. Monks, if both husband and wife aspire to see one another not only in this present life, but also in future lives, they should have the same confidence, the same virtuous behavior, the same generosity, and the same wisdom. Then they will see one another not only in the present life, but also in future lives. Both husband and wife are enriched with confidence, charitable, and mentally disciplined, living their lives righteously, addressing each other with pleasant words. Then maybe benefits accumulate to them and they reside at ease. Their enemies are saddened when both are the same in virtue, moral conduct. Having practiced the teachings here, the same in virtuous behavior and observances, enlightening after death in a heavenly world, they rejoice, enjoying sensual pleasures. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Keely. So the Buddha was guiding household practitioners towards enlightenment, but oftentimes household practitioners didn't have the ability, the amount of time that they had to be able to fully make their way to enlightenment during his lifetime because there were so many tasks. So here he's essentially teaching, if you fall short of enlightenment, this is the potential of what can occur. But also this same thing that he's describing here, if life partners end up deciding to practice this, it actually will help you to get to enlightenment too. But if you fall short of that, what he's saying is that, there's this potential that you guys can be reborn together and see each other again in a future life. And it doesn't mean you're going to be husband and wife in that future life, but you'll be in a similar relationship, that you'll have a relationship together. So you might be born as like brother and sister or something like this. So here, what he's saying is that it would be wise that in this life partnership that you have the same confidence. What he's talking about there is confidence in him and his teachings. The same virtuous behavior, that's the moral conduct. The same generosity, giving and sharing, and the same wisdom, meaning understanding the path to enlightenment of what's wholesome and what's unwholesome. And in this case, that not only would you be together in this life, that in future lives as you're being reborn, but ultimately the goal is not to be reborn. That's the ultimate goal, right? So maybe you're in a life partner relationship where you're like, I don't want to be with my partner in a future life. In fact, I don't even want to be in a future life. Okay, great. Well, in that case, you still need to build your confidence in the Buddha. You still need to build your virtuous behavior, your moral conduct. You still need to build your generosity, and you still need to build your wisdom. So this practice, this path to enlightenment isn't about what's going to happen in the future. It's about getting to peace and joy now. And these four things are actually going to help you to make your way to enlightenment. But as you practice having confidence, virtuous behavior, generosity, and wisdom in this current life, not only are your relationships going to be really beneficial and really improved, not only between husband or wife or life partnerships, but within your other relationships too. And here, the Buddha is giving this extra guidance of addressing each other with pleasant words. That's really important, that sometimes in these relationships, we're not functioning like that newly arrived bride, right? Remember back to that newly arrived bride. You would like to function like that in all your relationships, addressing each other with pleasant words. Sometimes we kind of dig at each other in the unenlightened state, and just little things are going to twist their buttons a little bit here and there. That's really unwise to be able to continue to do that. You would like to have endearing speech. He talks about this in other parts of his teachings, where you have this endearing speech with the people that are around you. So as you're doing that, you'll accumulate these benefits that you'll be able to reside at ease, because you're practicing in such a way that you have confidence, you have wholesome moral conduct, generosity, moral conduct, wisdom. So you have the confidence, the moral conduct, the generosity, and the wisdom. And then you're addressing each other with pleasant words. You guys are going to be at ease in your relationship. And then he says your enemies will be saddened, because your enemies are looking to break you guys up. They want you to be apart from each other. But when they see you guys functioning in a wonderful and loving way with each other, they're going to be saddened by that, right? So the Buddha is helping you to be able to understand, to be able to get to this improved relationship and ultimately to enlightenment. You would need to be practicing these things. But if you fall short of that for any reason, then there's the potential for you guys to be reborn together in a future life. But that's not the ultimate goal. And so for some of you guys in your life partnerships, you might think, yeah, I don't want to be reborn, and not with this person because we've had enough trouble. But now if you guys both are working to get to enlightenment, you'll get to such a wonderful relationship. You'll know that you're not going to be reborn with each other, but your relationship is just so wonderful and at ease. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this chapter. So Samantha, you have a question? Go ahead, ma'am.
I'm assuming that this would also apply to people who are, very special in your life, like your, I'll say, your best friend or something like that. If you're both on a similar path, it wouldn't necessarily have to be a household partner. Is that true?
That's true. That if you guys are all, say, like on the path to enlightenment, you're going to get along with all these people so much better. And then, of course, if you fall short of enlightenment with all these people, there's the potential for you to be reborn together in a future life. But of course, that's not the ultimate goal. But yeah, this is true for all the people around you. You probably noticed that like people that you are familiar with in this community, you guys get along so well together because you're all practicing the teachings. But then maybe there's other people that aren't in this community that you have been friends with either in the past or now, that it's a bit more challenging to have healthy relationships in those situations. And that's because they just don't have the understanding of these teachings.
Yes, I do see that. I have several people that don't quite understand the path I'm on. So I understand that. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, so Mayuli on YouTube, when the Buddha said the same, does he really mean identical, or can you have similar confidence, virtuous behavior, generosity, and wisdom? You can have the same. What he means by this is that if you look at his teachings on what it means to have confidence, it's to have confidence in him, the community, him, the teachings, in the community. And you can get to a point where you have that confidence, both of you. You can get to the point where you both are practicing the wholesome moral conduct from the Eightfold Path, because it's laid out very clearly. Of course, the way you talk, your personality, things like this is going to be different, but the underlying qualities that you guys are practicing is the same. Same with generosity and wisdom as well. Okay. All right. Looks like we have something coming in here. Let's see. Marcy, you have a question? Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, Teacher David. Future lives with the people that, that we have in our life. Is it possible that you can have recollections of past lives that incorporate people that you have in your life now in their past life? Is that something that's possible?
Yes. I had that experience. Like, I know my grandmother in this life was my mother in my previous life. And I also know that her brother was her husband in her previous life. So you can have that kind of recall for some people. But ultimately, it's just helping you to verify the cycle of rebirth and verify these kinds of things that the Buddha is teaching. So that's why, like, when I saw this teaching, I was like, oh yeah, I can verify this particular thing based on my grandmother and her brother. You know, I kind of had that already in my mind. I had that experience, so this helped me to be able to confirm that and know that it's true. But ultimately, it's not really helping you get to enlightenment necessarily. So if you don't have those recollections, it's okay. But this is how somebody can independently verify a teaching like this.
Okay. Yeah, because I had an experience or a recollection, and my current son was my father. So it was just something that I was wondering, like, is this something that's true? Is this something that was possible? But thank you, I appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so let's go to chapter 20. Is there someone who would like to read this? Okay, it looks like Pat. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. 7 kinds of wives. Then, in the morning, the perfectly enlightened one dressed, took his bowl and robe, and went to the residence of the householder Anatapakindika, where he sat down on the seat that was prepared for him. Now, on that occasion, people in Anatapakindika's residence were making an uproar and a disturbance. Then the householder Anatapakindika approached the perfectly enlightened one, paid homage to him, and sat down to one side. The perfectly enlightened one then said to him, "Householder, why are people in your residence making such an uproar and a disturbance? One would think it was a fisherman at a haul of fish. This venerable sir is my daughter-in-law, Sujata, who is rich and has been brought here from a rich family. She doesn't obey her father-in-law, her mother-in-law, her husband. She doesn't even honor, respect, appreciate, and venerate the perfectly enlightened one." Then the perfectly enlightened one addressed Sunjata. "Come here, Sunjata." "Yes, venerable sir," she replied. She went down to the perfectly enlightened one, paid homage to him, and sat down to one side. The perfectly enlightened one then said to her, "Sunjata, a man might have 7 kinds of wives." "What 7? One like a killer, one like a thief, one like a tyrant, one like a mother, one like a sister, one like a friend, and one like a helper. A man might have these 7 kinds of wives. Which one are you?" "Venerable sir, I do not understand in detail the meaning of this statement that the perfectly enlightened one has spoken in brief. Please let the perfectly enlightened one teach me the teachings in such a way that I might understand in detail the meaning of this statement spoken in brief." "Then listen and attend closely, Sunjata. I will speak." "Yes, venerable sir," she replied. The perfectly enlightened one said this: 1. With hateful mind, lacking of compassion, lusting for others, despising her husband, she seeks to kill the one who bought her with wealth. A wife like this is called a wife and a killer. 2. When the woman's husband acquires wealth by hard labor at a craft, trade, or farming, she tries to steal it, even if he earns but little. A wife like this is called a wife and a thief. 3. The lazy glutton, unwilling to work, harsh, fierce, rough speech, a woman who dominates her own supporters. A wife like this is called a wife and a tyrant. 4. One always compassionate and sympathetic, who guards her husband as a mother would her son, who protects the wealth he earns. A wife like this is called a wife and a mother. 5. She holds her husband in high regard as younger sister would her elder brother, careful to do tasks well, following her husband's will. A wife like this is called a wife and a sister. 6. One who rejoices when she sees her husband as if seeing a friend after a long absence. Well-raised, virtuous, devoted to her husband. A wife like this is called a wife and a friend. 7. One who remains patient and calm when threatened with violence by the rod, who tolerates her husband with a mind free of hate, patient, accommodating to her husband's intentions. A wife like this is called a wife and a helper. The types of wives here called the killer a thief, and a tyrant, unwholesome, harsh, disrespectful, with the body's breakup, go to hell. But the types of wives here called mother, sister, friend, and helper, firm in virtue, long restrained, with the body's breakup, go to heaven. A man, Sunjata, might have these 7 kinds of wives. Now, which one are you? Beginning today, Venerable Sir, let the perfectly enlightened one consider me a wife who is like a helper. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pat. So this is in my opinion, very clear, very straightforward discourse where the Buddha is essentially saying these are the 7 types of ways that we can have a relationship with our partner. And while he's talking about wife here, because he's talking to a female, we could apply this to other roles too, like a husband. There's 7 kinds of husbands, right? Or there's 7 kinds of life partners, essentially is what he's describing here. This particular individual was very rich and wealthy with their family, and now they've come to this particular home, and they're not living like that newly arrived bride that the Buddha is talking about, that they're not really paying respect to their in-laws and to their husband and so forth. And the Buddha says, okay, there's these 7 kinds of life partners, essentially, and he describes each one of those. And it's up to us to choose, which one we would like to be. We could potentially be the killer or the thief or the tyrant, which would be really unwise, but that might be how we function at different times during our relationship. And if we did, we can always change that. We can decide to either be the mother, the sister, the friend, or the helper. This would be a better way to function in terms of your relationship. And while the Buddha is talking about these as individuals, there's no reason why you couldn't practice all these qualities. So like number 4, 5, 6, and 7 are all wholesome qualities. Like you could be a partner who's compassionate and sympathetic, who guards your partner's resources. Just like a mother would protect their son, you could protect the wealth of your partner. And you could also have this one where he says, hold your life partner in high regard, like a younger sister would her brother, careful to do tasks. You could also do that, right? And so all these qualities here, even though the Buddha is describing them as 4 individual types of people, you could look at these wholesome qualities and say, I would like to cultivate all of these wholesome qualities to be the mother, sister, friend, and helper, right? And then when you see things where the Buddha is talking about these unwholesome qualities, you would like to eliminate all of those and make sure that you're not doing any of those things. So even though he's describing them as individuals, you can accumulate the wholesome qualities and practice those closer and closer, and then look at the unwholesome qualities and decide to purge those from any relationships that you're in. So let me know if you guys have any questions here on this chapter. Remember, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or in Zoom. Okay. I don't see any questions anywhere. So I'm just going to end class by thanking all of you guys for joining. I appreciate your interest to learn and practice the teachings of the Buddha. Next week, we're going to be in the next 10 chapters, which is chapters 21 through 30. So you're welcome to attend class to learn those as well. As you would like to go forward. Oh, it looks like Martha has a question. Go ahead, ma'am. Do you have a question?
Do you have a minute at the end of the class?
Sure, I'll stick around.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. All right. So again, thank you all for joining. I appreciate your interest to learn. Thank you for everyone who read or asked questions, or contributed in any way to the class. Thank you so much. Next week, we're going to be in the next set of chapters, so feel free to read those ahead of time if you like. You can download these books from our website. You can get them through Amazon. You can get them at our temple in Chiang Mai, so you can get access to these particular books. Tomorrow in our group learning program, I'm going to be in chapter 17 of volume 1, which is eliminating fears. Are you really scared? I'm going to teach you what's causing the fear and how to actually eliminate it. So that might be something you decide to learn. And I'll be teaching that on Sunday at 9 a.m. Thai time and 9 p.m. Thai time as well. And then on Wednesday, I'm going to be doing meditation and opening up to any and all questions. And all of next week, I'm going to be teaching here in California, and we're going to be live streaming that. So if you would like to attend any of those classes, you're welcome to do that. I'm going to be teaching the introduction to the path to enlightenment on Wednesday. And then Thursday through Sunday, I'm going to be teaching the foundation and the path to enlightenment course. So you guys are welcome to tune in or attending by YouTube, Facebook, or Zoom. And then also they're going to be recorded too, so you can learn that way as well. So again, thank you all. Have a very wonderful and lovely rest of your day, and perhaps I'll see you guys in a future class. Take care and be well. Sawadee krap.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To provide support for this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha. To access more teachings, visit buddhadailywisdom.com. There, you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Remember to establish a daily, consistent meditation practice, along with learning and practicing these teachings. A well-developed meditation practice is the foundation in which to train the mind to attain enlightenment.